have to be in the mindset and understand that a venue is a sought good. Nobody knows you exist or cares about you until they need you. Nobody will say, oh my gosh, this venue is so good, I'm going to get married so I can come here. But when they need you, they have to find you, and they're going to go look online. They're going to say venue near me, wedding venue near me, outdoor wedding. They're going to search for those things. So if your presence isn't right, they won't find you. Now, once they find you, your sales has to be right, your place has to be right, your location, all of those things.
We document and share best practices around owning, operating, and managing world-class wedding venues.
All right, Neal, Hayden, welcome to the Venue RX. Thank you so much for being here today.
Hey, Jonathan, thanks for having us on.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, this is going to be a great conversation. Hayden, I had such a great time connecting with you, and Neal, just meeting you here. I'm excited to hear about, your different backgrounds. And Neal, I'm curious, speaking of backgrounds, I see in your background, is that a ukulele back there or a guitar?
It is. No, that's my little ukulele.
Very cool. All
Picked
right.
it up about a year ago, and I know like 4 songs now, so killing it.
That's awesome. You've done better than I have. I have a ukulele, and I've picked it up probably 4 times at this point, and it's been about a year as well. So I need to get on that. But tell me a little bit. Maybe Neal, could we start with you and kind of just go through your professional and personal background, and kind of just with a little bit of an explanation how you got into the wedding and events industry?
Yeah. Kind of through the back door, honestly. I was working with one of my very best friends who owns a business that sells office supplies and furniture. And it's a family business. His dad was retiring, and he said, come and do our sales, learn the business. Let's buy the business from my dad. And so I had the opportunity, so we jumped in. And my very first client, because I knew a couple of guys in this new company called the Falls Event Center. And they had a pretty aggressive idea of how they wanted to build event centers. And they were just building their first one. They had plans to do 100 of them, or, all over the country. So they were pretty aggressive. They were raising a lot of money. And I walked into a meeting, and they were just getting ready to kind of furnish their first event center. And I said, hey, why don't you let us do it? And then I called my buddy and said, hey, can we do this? Kind of out of our wheelhouse, but I think I just sold this. And so I was involved with them from the very beginning, just in the design and the functionality of their centers. And because they were new and I was new, we were figuring it out, I got pretty involved. And over the first couple of centers that they built, the owner kept saying, hey, why don't you join our team? Why don't you come on board? And I thought this other opportunity was good. And so I just put him off until finally, after I think we were building the 5th or 6th one, I had seen kind of some operational issues that I thought were off from where I was sitting. And so I was a little nervous about it. And he pushed and he pushed. And in fact, it was about 11:30 one night. We were doing an install of a center that was opening the next morning. And he said, how do I get you on my team full time? I said, it's 11:30. How much more full time do you want, buddy? And anyway, I finally said, look, here are some problems I see. I figured I had nothing to lose. I said, 1, 2, 3, 4, here's some problems. If I have authority to fix those things and you give me this salary, sure, I'll come on. And he said, yes. So he called my bluff, and I jumped in. And as it turns out, it was the problems I didn't see were much bigger.
Yeah.
And so when we came in, I think that was 2016, and they had lost year to date. It was near the end of the year, September, October, something like that. I think they had lost operationally about $1.2 million, just operationally, not even their debt. They were operating at a deficit. They was raising a lot of money, so nobody was paying much attention to it. And so we dug in and tried to figure out where the problems were. And they were, of course, when you're losing that much money, there's problems all over the place. And so we started putting together a model that we thought could be profitable operationally, and learned a lot of lessons. Hayden will talk about this too. Hayden was part of a marketing team that was in a separate company that was mostly that we were paying a lot of money for, because the owner owned that company too. And so it was just money flying everywhere. But we pulled kind of a core group of people together that kind of had the same idea, that we can run this in a way that's profitable. This is a great business if we do it the right way. So we made a lot of changes. We can get into some of these when we talk more specifically, but we made changes to our staffing, to our payroll. I think we cut the payroll in half. We made some changes to the offering. We made a lot of changes to the marketing, to just how we ran the business, and changed our whole mindset from what it was to getting this in a better way, and just managing it, just putting solid business principles into place. By the end of the next year, we turned the $1.2 million deficit into $400,000 in the black, and $1.4 million the next year. So it was just really applying a new mindset, thinking about the business differently, thinking of it as a business and running it the right way was a real turnaround. And so when I say I came in the back door, most of the people I know in the industry have either run a venue and come up in that way and, set up tables and chairs and have done the whole thing. I did that after. And I came at it, we just had this unique viewpoint, having at that point 8 venues in 5 states, and needing to look at how each of them had to run independently on their own, and having access to all of that data and all of the information, and then watching it change as our mindset changed, was a really unique vantage point. And as that opportunity wound down, and Hayden and a couple of guys that kind of are on the periphery that we still use, our controller and some other people that we know and use, just came out of it thinking that, hey, this is a cool business if you run it the right way. And then, we've had other experiences since, but that's how I got in.
Very cool. Very cool. I was curious, when you said building, do you mean physically hammer and nails? Are you building the venue like from a construction standpoint, or are you talking about operationally building templates and systems and automations and the CRM and the sales process and all of that? What do you mean in terms of build?
Well, they were physically building new event venues, purpose-built venues in the States. They had, like I said, we ended up with 8. I think 6 of the 8 were set. 5 of the 8 were built by that company, by the Falls. And they had, I think at the time, 20 or 25 other properties with centers in various stages of building. So they were pretty aggressive in their thoughts. So there was that sense of building buildings, but then we were building just the business inside of it. Our job was the operation of the business. So we were building systems inside the company.
That makes sense. So Hayden, give me your side. We heard Neal's kind of way. I'm interested to see your story, your background, and how it kind of weaves its way into intersecting with Neal's story.
Yeah. So if Neal came in through the back door, I came in through the emergency exit, okay, into this whole industry. So basically, I started out, this was about like 2015, 2016. I was working in a corporate job, and my job title was a graphic designer. And they told me they wanted me to make videos for their software. And this was a loan servicing software company. And so, as you can imagine, it didn't really get me out of bed in the morning too much. And it was one of those positions where it was a startup. It was great. There was a lot of energy. However, they didn't have a whole lot of content for me to go off of. So I would go to work, and they wanted me to stay there until like 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock at night. But I would finish all of my work in about 2 hours, and my computer screen faced everybody. And so So a bulk of my job was just like sitting there like, what am I doing with this time? How can I make the most of it? And that's when I started figuring out like, okay, well, if I can't get onto Facebook or YouTube or whatever and waste my time, let's see if we can just maximize it. So I started teaching myself digital marketing. And while I was doing that, I knew my brother, he worked in an agency. And so I was like, hey, if you have any freelance work at all, tell these guys while I'm learning, if they bring me on, they don't have to pay me if they don't see any results. And so I took on some clients. I started learning. That's a great way to learn, by the way. That's a very high stakes way to learn. But we brought these guys on. We brought on clients, and I started getting more and more confident with it. And then eventually, I got a call from Jared, who was running the marketing agency that was handling the Falls Event Center. And he was saying, hey, we need someone like you to come in and fill a spot in this agency. And at that point, I was just like, yes, absolutely yes. You know, I was interested in it. I loved it. I loved getting into the data. I loved recognizing patterns. I loved tracking everything that people were doing and seeing like how we could improve things. And so I was like, absolutely, this is my shot. Let's do it. So he told me, he's like, the only problem is we can't bring you on full time. It's got to be a contract position. It was a little tough for me at the time because my wife was expecting our first kid and I was in the middle of my master's degree. So that like 6-month window is accountable for like 8 of my gray hairs because like it was very high stress. But I said, yeah, let's do it. Let's move forward. I go and I start working at this agency and I started looking at what they were doing from an ad perspective. And what they were doing was mainly running awareness ads for all of these venues. And they had me create reports. And so on these reports, I would pull in numbers like, this is how many people are actually submitting forms, actually, you know, reaching out, contacting you. And my manager asked me to take that stuff off the report. He was like, don't include that. Let's not do that. Let's not get anyone lost in the weeds. Just focus on clicks and impressions and stuff like that. And I was
the bigger number.
I was just like, no way. Like that feels so dirty to me. And it was crazy to see that was like part of the industry because I knew that they were charging a pretty penny for all of these services. And any ad company can look good if they're just showing you clicks and impressions and all of that. You know, any ad agency can look really good for that. So as you can expect, that ad agency wasn't able to sustain itself. So they started to fall by the wayside, but the Falls Event Center needed somebody. And since I had already worked with them, I had helped set up all of their tracking, I helped set up all their reporting, I had this very uncomfortable conversation with Neal where I sat down with him. He was understandably upset because they were paying like $40,000 a month for this ad agency and all of these event centers were in the hole. And so he sat me down. He's just like, you want to tell me what's going on here? You know? And I was just like, okay, hold on. Whoa. And so I had to give him all the context and let him know like, hey, I was the force in this agency that was trying to push for more transparency and to try and figure things out. And I was kind of stifled. And so he said, all right, you know, hesitantly, he was like, all right. I'll give you a small runway. Let's see if it works. And so they came on and it was like, okay, this is my biggest client right now. I got to deliver and I got to juggle all these other things. So I made it a top priority and they were running an ad spend of like, I think it was like $5,000 per event center. And they were like, you got $1,000 per event center and that's it. So I said, okay, let's make the most of this. What's that?
Per month or per year?
Per month.
Okay.
So I said, all right, well, let's see if we can make the most of this. So I was in a situation where I had to figure out very quickly what was working and what wasn't working, where they needed to spend their ad spend, where they needed to just pull back from, what sources were converting well and what sources were just wasting their money. So that's kind of how Neal and I started working together. And so we saw this process, we saw this formula start working. And then after that, we started taking it to other venues. We're like, hey, what if we tried this elsewhere? You know, and so that's the beginning of this whole friendship here.
You know, and it's interesting, Jonathan, you know, and as now Hayden and I converge and our worlds converge, like I said, we had this interesting vantage point, having all of the data from these centers. We had 8 centers in 5 states, all of them a little bit different demographics, but we're trying to find the similarities. And when I came in I think September of 2016, they had hired the parent company that owned the Falls and some other businesses had hired a new CFO who was a pretty, qualified, good dude, supposed to help clean stuff up. And my first conversation with him when I'm brand new is, hey, I'm looking at these numbers. They don't look very good. Is this salvageable? And he said, no, absolutely not. Okay. And so this is September. And we had already started to have some meetings and started to kind of think through what we wanted to do. And I said, all right, can you give me until the second quarter of next year? And let's see if, if some of this stuff's going to work. And he said, yeah, sure. So not only did we have the vantage point of all this data, we had a pretty specific time crunch of how to turn this around quickly. So we had to learn really fast how to do it. And, obviously the results were good. And by the second quarter, we'd started to turn it around, and he changed his tune. It was a salvageable company. Eventually it wasn't, because the debt was too high, but we were operating it profitably. We just couldn't overcome the debt that was not of our doing. So that time, the pressure of that time and the immensity of the task really forced us to learn pretty quickly.
So bring me up to speed with where you're at today. So you both have these backgrounds, Hayden from marketing, Neal from operations, and so many other pieces, and kind of you converge together. And so post Falls, what are you guys doing, and what's the business look like today?
Well, so we wrapped up. So eventually the Falls had to go into a bankruptcy. And we were able, I always have to say this, Hayden will smile, because this is the proudest moment in my career. 8 event centers in 5 states had to be sold or closed or moved on to someone else. We were able to accomplish that without disrupting a single event. Nobody's wedding got canceled. Nobody got displaced. We were able to walk through that. And our most profitable year was the year we were in bankruptcy. And so what?
I want to throw some context in here. So it's not just, it wasn't just the debt that caused all of the bankruptcy. It was also the top guy running everything. He was a shady dude, and he was doing some pretty uncool things. He was investigated by the SEC. The FBI was involved. And at the end of the day, shareholders weren't happy. And he was, I think, I'm not sure where he is right now. I think he might be in Mexico or something like that. But that was probably one of the main reasons why the Falls Event Center completely collapsed. It was just like, yeah, he made a lot of promises that he couldn't keep.
Well, and I'll tell you, one of the other interesting lessons, but because this goes to the rest of the story, Jonathan, is that we were maintaining an operations profit and a team and ongoing sales in the midst of that environment, swirling around everyone with the uncertainty that comes of that. And we're able to keep a really awesome team focused on their work, a team that was passionate about what they did, who got that, this business is really cool and it's really important to families and communities and companies that we have this space and that it works for them. And to keep that crazy world that was swirling around them and all the uncertainty that came with it, especially when we went into bankruptcy, and keep them focused on their work to the point that, they were doing their work, maintaining the events, getting great reviews, doing what they had to do, is such a tribute to the kinds of people that are attracted to this industry. And one of the things that makes it really fun to be in this business, there's lots of businesses, but to be in a business that means something to people and makes a difference in their lives, it keeps you going. So as we went through the process of wrapping all of that up, Hayden and I had conversations about this, and some of the other people we worked with, but we just had this trove of knowledge now. There's a way to run these things that can be profitable. And this is a really fun business. And how do we take this to the next place? So both Hayden and I had created our own companies. Hayden, a digital marketing company. I'd created a management company. And the first management contract that I was able to get, obviously I called Hayden and said, and so this is the beginnings of Venue Spark. Now we have all this learning, but we were still doing things separately. I said, I've got a management contract. I'm not doing this if you're not in. So come and bid on this. And we were able to bring on a brand new venue and help them get set up and launch in.
And guess what year it was?
Has to be 2020. Oh, I was going to say it's either early
and opening November 1st, 2019.
Yeah. Crazy getting new venue. Okay.
Closing date February 11th or whatever that day was.
Yeah. Oh, man. Yeah. So that was crazy, but at the same time, it was a way to stress test this model. So we're like, okay, let's put this to the test. And if you could think of a more difficult challenge or hurdle to get over than COVID for an event venue, I'm all ears. But to us, it was just completely, really, really difficult challenge. But it was really unique because it was like, all right, let's just put our money where our mouth is and let's see if this model works. So I think their first year, I think what was it? They started in like the second or the third quarter is when they officially launched.
November 1st.
November. So their first year, November, we helped them out. And I think the first year ended with like around 71,000 in sales. And so then from there till I think it was like in the middle of the pandemic, we got them to about 370. So in the pandemic, we were still able to help them grow. What was that?
Where was the venue?
Utah. This is in northern Utah.
In Utah. Okay, got it.
Yeah, cool. And so as of today, so we're still working with them. As of today, just right now, they're at about like 544,000. So they came out of the pandemic super strong. All the other venues during the pandemic were closing their doors, and they approached us and they're like, what do you guys recommend right now? I said, you guys, you're a brand new venue. This is an opportunity. Okay. This is a time where you can grab market share. Let's lean up our model. Let's figure this out. And let's keep your doors open and keep the events coming, because people are still going to have events even during the pandemic. Let's figure out all the rules and the regulations and make sure everything's handled safely. But at the same time, let's grow our market share.
And we were lucky, by the way, because I know we were lucky to be in Utah for this reason, because we've worked with some venues in Oregon and some other states that shut down tight.
Yeah,
and Utah was not one of those. When I looked at venues in Utah versus like Oregon, Utah was act like there was no COVID. Not quite. I mean, there were still regulations, but we worked very closely with the local health department to the point that they finally told me, please quit calling us. You guys know as much as we do now. You're doing the right things. Just don't ask anymore. Because we wanted to make sure if we were doing it, that we were doing it right, that we were keeping people safe. And we did, and we followed the regulations. But yeah, even in those circumstances, people wanted to be together. And if we could do it the right way, then they wanted to have it. So yeah, so we doubled down. And I think, and this was largely Hayden's doing, we watched the marketing of our competitors, and it felt very much the same. They're showing, a lot of social media, showing beautiful pictures of weddings. And it kind of felt like they weren't reading the room at all. Like, hey, wish you could have this wedding, all of these pictures. And as we strategized, and this came from Hayden, we thought, let's be educating people as well. If you're going to meet, here are some things you should know. You can still do this if you know and do the following things. Here's how you can still do it. Here's how we can help spread you out. Here's how we can follow the rules. And so we were using our marketing dollars to keep the name out there, but also to be a helpful resource for people who still wanted to do something. And so the ability that we had because of our model for that venue owner to own their marketing and to pivot when they needed to pivot and adjust the messaging and not rely on anyone else changed everything for them. They went from a brand new venue and emerged out of COVID as the number one venue in their area. Wow. Because they just did all the right things. I think that we helped them get through that.
Yeah. So when you work with someone, are you coming on board as an operational partner, or are you running the venue for them? Like, are you boots on the ground? Are you helping hire people, or are you coming in more as a consultant? Like, what's your position? Are you setting up tables and chairs? Are you like, help me understand a little bit deeper. I understand the marketing piece. That's fairly straightforward, could be done from wherever, but from an operations or any other service perspective, how do you guys physically interact with venues?
We have done all of the above, and so with this particular client, and then we brought on one other client that's a little bit interesting, because this client in northern Utah really listened, and the results were that they emerged out of this very difficult time on the top of the market. We had another client we brought in that was trying to emerge out of COVID, that we tried to teach the same lessons to, tried to give them the benefit of the experience we've had, that was adamant that they knew how to do it and just wanted some marketing help. And we lasted a year there and finally said, it's not worth it to do this, because you want to do what you want to do. And they shut down a year later because they just couldn't emerge. But the point was, we were at that point working separately. Hayden was doing marketing, I was doing operations, and the model was, in both of those places, I was setting up tables and chairs, I was training a staff, I was doing all the things, and that model just didn't work for us. It didn't leverage our experience. It didn't give us kind of the authority that we needed to teach the lessons, and that's what we saw. One succeeded, one failed. So that, out of that experience with those two, is where Hayden and I sat down and said, let's create a new entity that really leverages our experience and helps existing venue owners to do what they do better, to be more profitable. And in the midst of that, our goals are also that we'll acquire our own venues that we can run on our own, we can own and test our model and keep fresh on all of that stuff while we're helping other venue owners.
Yeah. And I think one of the big takeaways from that other venue, like, keep in mind, this was a venue in like downtown Salt Lake City. And as we were talking before, like, location is like 60% of the job, right? Location is like huge. So on paper, these guys shouldn't fail. But what we've realized is that really it's the difference in mindset when it comes to running your venue. So to get some examples here, so they had like this full-time gourmet chef on salary, right? And so they kind of started bloating their payroll quite a bit. And one of the things we constantly preach to venue owners is lean. Like, think leanly, lean first. And so if you've got a salaried gourmet chef, you're paying him whether or not events are coming through your business. That's a huge, it's just this massive suck on your overall revenue and stuff like that. And so it drains everything else. They had a bunch of other people that were on staff that didn't necessarily need to be full-time salaried employees, but could have been more like gig workers or contract workers and things like that. And so it was that they weren't able to change that mindset and say, all right, how can we do this efficiently? How can we do this leanly? And instead of throwing bodies at our problems, how can we throw systems at our problems that we can lean into? And it's those systems that we found that keeps you profitable and doing really well in the good times, and it keeps you survivable in the bad times. So that's one of the major takeaways that we've learned over the past several years.
So I was going to ask a couple of different questions, and there's so many interesting parts. I'm interested in the kind of the falls. We could go into that a little bit more, and kind of like what you saw from a from a build up and shut down, because I think that life cycle is very interesting, and the fact that you were part of that whole thing, there's a lot of lessons there. But I think I'd like to go very kind of specific and value added for our audience. And I think this would be an interesting play. So I also want to mention for everyone, your guys' company is called Venue Spark, but you've really been just working more than marketing what you do, because it sounds like you've had the clients that you've been able to handle without even doing a lot of extra marketing for yourself. Is that correct?
Yeah. So there's this other company in the UK that has a Venue Spark website. And so that's not ours. We don't even have a website yet. Like, as soon as we started approaching venue owners, we started getting work. And so we haven't had really time until just recently this year. Neal and I sat down and we said, all right, we need to start making this more of a full-time deal. And so let's start getting a little bit more serious about that. So the website is in the works, but if you go to their page, you're going to be talking with some bloke in the UK and you might be a little confused.
Totally fair. So as soon as you guys have the website, we'll of course put it in, but I do want to note that. But I'm curious, guys. I've been in this industry for a long time, 11, 12, going on 12 years, something like that. And Hayden, to your point, I think you can inflate payroll. You can have people on salaries. You can be operationally very clunky, and it impacts your agility and your survivability in downtimes, right? And your profitability in the really good times. And there are going to be market cycles and all of that. But guys, I'm curious, what is a kind of sample recipe for a really successful venue? Hayden, you mentioned 60% location. Give me a recipe. If someone's listening to this right now and they're like, gosh, I'd really love to be in the industry. This group of guys seems to know what they're talking about. What are we picking a good location? Are we hiring good operators? Are we fully systems based? Like, what is the setup? And be as specific as you feel like being.
So I'm going to start, Hayden, and then I'm interested in your comments too. So here's a couple of don'ts, right?
There.
One of the things that we learned at the Falls is that the Falls, and some of the people listening may be aware of the Falls. We had 3 of them in California. We had a couple in Gilbert, Arizona, Denver, Colorado, Salt Lake City. The Falls buildings, the event venues themselves were gorgeous. They were really, really beautiful. The fact is, they spent way too much money on it. They were putting in $60,000 chandeliers, and they were building, beautiful brick walls, and the tile was perfect. Everything was high end. But the fact is, the types of events that they could generate for the size and everything else, we're never going to be able to pay for those amenities. And that $60,000 chandelier never added $1 in sales. Nobody came in and said, I want this venue because of that chandelier. So one of the don'ts is, your location is important, but if you're building or if you're going into a location, you've got to be very aware of what's coming into your building and market to that. I think location's important, but I also think there are events at all sorts of price points. And if you know who you're trying to get, then you build your budget and your marketing and your pricing based on that, and you can still have a profitable venue. And so that's when I started my management company, I called it lagom, which is a Swedish word that means just enough and no more. And that was what we learned, one of the lessons of the Falls, in building the buildings, in what you spend on marketing, in where you spend your dollars, in what you spend on your pricing. Spend enough to maximize your revenue and don't spend any more. And that's one of the really, really important things in the systems, in our staffing, in everything, in the services we offer. Spend what you need to understand what you can maximize in your revenue. That's one of the things that we can learn in a venue. Because our inventory has no shelf life, if you know that, then you can you can gauge your capacity and what you can earn in that venue, spend enough to get to that. And don't spend any more than that.
So how would someone, just to dive a little bit deeper in there, how would someone know that without, like, how would you know that the chandelier wasn't going to be the attraction piece before installing it? Like, how do you determine what that good enough level is, that logom? I love that you use that. It's fantastic. How do you figure out what that good enough is for your market, and what kind of that initial space is to meet the needs of the audience? Again, speaking to someone who maybe is brand new or thinking about starting a second location or something like that.
So that's a really good question. What we finally developed at the Falls, but too late, was a pretty sophisticated series of spreadsheets with equations in them, where you could plug your costs in and your anticipated pricing, how many rooms you were going to have, what they could give you. So it's a model that was built that would give you your return on investment. So there are some pretty sophisticated tools that we have for someone that's very serious about investing in building a space. If you're buying or if you're going into an existing space, which many venue owners do, it may be too much program and you may just have to have a gut feel. But there are certainly ways to start to understand, and I would say start with the end in mind, right? To borrow the phrase. Looking at your venue, even doing a quick market analysis, knowing kind of what you want to charge and what you think the market will bear for the events, you can start to do some analysis on the revenue that you can generate, and then do some very simple calculations of what it's going to cost you to, if you're going into debt for this, when you can get out of your debt. It's like I said earlier, without beating the dead horse, just business practices for venue owners to think through the strategy of what you're trying to do will give you a pretty good sense of what to add. It may not tell you add the chandelier or not add the chandelier. Sometimes that's just a gut, but you can be as sophisticated as you want, I guess.
Right. And I think what we do is we kind of champion that kind of minimum viable product approach, where we say, all right, instead of thinking before you open your doors, you need the chandelier and you need the expensive, all of the linens, and you need everything to be just the nines. Maybe start off with not looking like garbage or anything, but maybe see what you can do to make it the minimum viable product and try and get traffic there. If you get a lot of complaints and a lot of feedback from people that are like, man, if only they had a chandelier, that would have made it better, then okay, adapt your models, get the chandelier, invest in it, but go off of your feedback, listen to your data, so start lean, stay lean, and listen to that data, and then adapt when it tells you to adapt.
That's a good point, Hayden. Sorry, Jonathan, but yet I don't have a beef with a $60,000 chandelier, but you better make sure you're going to get events that are justifying the price of that are coming in because that environment wants them. But if you're competing, if you don't understand who you're competing with in your marketplace, that's going to help drive, what kind of traffic you're going to get, what they're willing to pay for.
I want to go the other side of this. Someone's listening to this and they're like, I have a $60,000 chandelier.
Yahtzee. Oh no.
I've got the perfect tile, and I've got this, and I've dumped, $3 or $5 million into this venue, and they're kind of in that place where, to do a blank canvas model doesn't really make sense for the finances. Or maybe there's something like a balloon payment coming up in 3 years. They did some sort of, creative finance option or something like that. In your guys' experience, I think with the Falls, even just the venues that you've worked with, how do you lean something out like that? Or is the only path to add revenue, add as much revenue as you can through packages or through ancillary services to kind of get gets revenue up? Like, what does someone do in that situation if they are there? They do have that $60,000 chandelier. They're not selling the events that are coming for that. What's the move?
So, I mean, obviously everyone's going to be a little bit different. I'll tell you, at the Falls, when we got to the point where, you know, there were some saying, hey, look, the only choice is here. We got to throw this into bankruptcy. And again, it was magnified because there were so many venues and the company owned those venues, right? So that it wasn't just the operate. We couldn't just pick up the operation and move it to another building. I mean, it was all together. I would say that, I mean, without looking at a specific situation, I don't know what they are, but we came up with a handful of possible solutions. Part of which was the cost of the building is sunk. I mean, we can't undo that. So what do we do with that? And we had solutions in place, proposals in place that we had people who were investors who would have, knowing that they may lose their whole investment, were willing to come buy the building and then allow us to rent it so that we could keep the operation ongoing, pay their rent price, and eventually it just took that big debt and spread it out a little bit differently. So there are, I am a guy, unfortunately or fortunately, that doesn't tap out very easy. And so I think there are always ideas. If you've got a good, viable business, there's always ideas for how to get out of the situation. And maybe you can sell your way out of it. And maybe it just means that the profit that you as an owner are going to take out of it is going to be prolonged. And it's just going to take longer. The Falls, while it was an interesting learning experience, was also a little different because there were investors and there were other people. And so that came into play too. We couldn't just create a solution. It wasn't ours to do. So, but I think there are creative solutions for sure.
And I think I want to touch down on what you mentioned. You said, should they add packages? Should they add other services and stuff like that? This is one of the tips that we often see, that we often give out to venue owners. One of the most common patterns we see, we call it the buffet venue. So venue owners a lot of times will start out and they don't quite have their calendars full. They don't have revenue where they want it to be. And so instead of trying to focus on filling that calendar, they try and focus instead on making the most revenue that they can out of every single event that comes through their doors. And so they add things like decor, and they add flowers, and they add event planning, and they add a bunch of other services. And it seems like the natural solution to it, but it's a Faustian bargain because those different services come with their own overhead and their own learning curves. And so it really jams up your processes. It keeps you from being efficient. It keeps you from being lean, and it keeps you overwhelmed. It keeps you from being able to stay on top of your data and to stay on top of your books. So we always preach, stay in your core offering, and your core offering is the space, right? If you want to offer these other services, work deals with vendors, right? Say, all right, let's get some people in here who this is their whole job. That's what they do. They've got their own processes and systems. You don't have to reinvent that wheel. And so we preach this message of stay in that core offering and don't focus necessarily on trying to sell those prime dates. Those prime dates, more times than not, are going to sell themselves. Your whole job is to sell your space on those off-peak days. That's where your focus should be. How do you fill those dates? Drive traffic in there, run different campaigns, test out different messaging, see what works. And then you're able to fill up your calendar. And then if your calendar's full, great. It's kind of like that landlord approach. If all of your units are full, you should never have them like 100% full. If 100% are full, you're making a mistake. You're losing revenue. And so raise your prices, and then keep going.
That's one of I love that, Hayden. And we learned that lesson in the Falls when we were trying to come out of this. And we really did a lot of analysis on what our inventory was, what it meant. What's the difference between a prime week and a weekday and a weeknight and a Sunday? And who should those be marketed to? So, yeah, so rather than throwing more services in and inflating our revenue but decreasing our profit, we focused on the core and understood our market segments better, and then could go to our marketing and really laser our marketing dollars. And so every dollar was laser focused on weeks and days and inventory that wasn't sold yet. That's where we needed that. So we actually went away from some of our wedding marketing and focused on our corporate, because our weeknights and our weekdays were not full, but our prime dates were fine. So understanding your marketing and staying in that core place, again, it allows you to stay lean and make sure every dollar is being returned to you.
That's beautiful. That's awesome. I'm curious about the marketing, and we're doing such a cursory overview of this. There's like a million questions that I'm not asking for, but I'm curious from a marketing perspective. Hayden, do you think what is the impact of really good marketing? Like, do you think you could have terrible marketing and still have a successful venue?
It depends. It depends on a couple of things. So have I seen venues with terrible marketing that are filling up their dates? Yes. Because what is the goal of marketing? The goal of marketing is to establish yourself in your market position. It's to establish yourself, position yourself, to build that awareness and generate leads. Have I seen venues that do that say like, yeah, they just waste a lot of ad spend and they do whatever? Absolutely, they're out there. But I'd say more times than not, for a lot of venues, like for that venue in Salt Lake City, their marketing was garbage. It was trash. And because of that, they weren't able to bring in the right people. And because their systems were so bloated, they weren't able to sustain anything. And so, it's all about that laser focus in your marketing. There are a lot of people that'll spend money on like magazines or, these big shotgun approaches that are hard to track. They're
directories that we're not in love with.
And so it's really difficult because that you don't get that data back. So you don't know if it's working. You don't know if it's resonating, and you don't know if it's ever going to drive people. And more times than not, we've seen that those kinds of approaches, they don't really drive people. You've got a younger generation coming up. And so to be online is crucial. It's essential to be online. So I would say for most venues, their marketing is kind of their make or break. And it's because of a few different things. One of them is primarily like the directories that are out there. So there are a lot of directories out there. And I think for the most part, I think a directory isn't like necessarily a bad thing to have, but a lot of times the frustration that I've had with them is they strip out the emotion from what could be argued as the most emotional decision you should be making in your life. Right? Like this is your wedding. It's okay. This isn't like going out and snagging some ice cream from Walmart when you're hungry. It's okay to have an emotional decision. And so we tell people, create your own marketing and sales channels and pipelines and systems so that you can control them. So if you build on rented land, is what we call it. Don't build on rented land. Don't just dump 100% into these directories, because they could change things. If they want to change things, they might be able to change the algorithm, and then boom, your leads are gone. Whereas if you had built your own marketing systems and were driving them and creating your own online experience for brides and for guests, then you can adapt when you need to adapt. You can stay agile when market forces come to bear on your venue. And so I tend to lean more into marketing, and I think it's crucial for venues these days. But I am biased. I'm very biased.
Well, 100%. But I'm curious, do you think, so let's ask that question kind of in the reverse way. Is it possible, or like under what circumstances could a venue not have great marketing, but still, and let's assume it's just not great, not that they're doing it wrong, but like say they throw up a random website and the pictures aren't that beautiful. Maybe their SEO isn't that great. Maybe, what things might be the case where they are still able to get business and be a venue that is busy and I wouldn't necessarily say profitable, but is booking their dates?
Well, I guess there are probably owners who maybe are satisfied. We're just talking now to a brand new a venue that hasn't launched yet. They're just building it here in Utah. And in my first conversation with them, they said, "Oh yeah, we're excited to talk to you guys. There's so much we need to learn, but we're really excited because we think we can do 10 events a month here." And I would, 10? What? Why wouldn't you want to do 30 events? And they didn't even know it was possible. Now, some people and some venues I know are really happy because they know their thing is seasonal. They own it themselves and operated themselves, and they're very satisfied with what they can drive with word of mouth. They're happy to have it. They like the events, but they don't want to be overwhelmed with booking what I would look at maximum inventory. So if that's who they are and where they are, bully for you. You found what you want, and that's great. What I think that most venue owners, though, who want to fill their space have to be in the mindset and understand that a venue is a sought good. Nobody knows you exist or cares about you until they need you. Nobody will say, "Oh my gosh, this venue is so good, I'm going to get married so I can come here." You can't sell them on that. But when they need you, they have to find you. And they're going to go look online. They're going to say venue near me, wedding venue near me, outdoor wedding. They're going to search for those things. So if your presence isn't right, they won't find you. Now, once they find you, your sales has to be right, your place has to be right, your location, all of those things. But if we're running them, and to the genius of Hayden, and I'll toot his horn because this is why we work together, because I appreciate you so much, is to figure out how to qualify the people that are looking. How do you write the ads? How do you put the calendar together? How do you get in front of the people? How do you maximize the local SEO and all the local citations so that the people looking for you find you, so that the salespeople are as efficient as possible? The leads coming in are already qualified, so X number of leads means X number of prospects, means X number of sales. And this starts to become predictable. And your success now is engineered rather than imagined. Yeah. And when you can have those kinds of systems, that's where the marketing becomes so important. And good marketing becomes important because then you're not spending dollars that are not effective. Yeah. And every other part of the system then can benefit by getting the right people in the door from the beginning.
Yeah. Gosh, that is so well said. I feel like it's some people, I think most venue owners, their marketing dollars, they don't know if something is working, they don't know exactly why it's working. And if it's not working, or it's not working as well as they like it to, they also don't know why it's not working. Like there's a lot of ambiguity around that. But as a spin-off question from that, and I'm curious about both of your perspectives on this one. Do you feel like marketing is a few well-placed silver bullets or more of a 100-layer cake? In terms of how you, so a silver bullet maybe would be an amazing SEO, right?
Right.
SEM strategy.
Perfectly placed ad, with the right graphics and everything. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. If you got good SEO and those are your two silver bullets, boom, you don't have to worry about the other things. Or is it like get on TikTok, Periscope, if that's still a thing, like, you want to be on
yak. Yeah.
Yeah, whatever it is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I got hung up on the cake piece. I haven't eaten today yet, so I'm a little hungry, but I think to answer your question, I think it is more similar to cake than it is to like the silver bullets. It's about creating an intentional experience for them. And it's the whole purpose of marketing for an event venue is to create a mental image of what their event could look like in your space. So it's about saying, it's about getting in front of them when they're ready to look for you. And that's good. That's not the whole equation. That gets them to your site. Now it's on your site. Your site has a job, and your site's job is to give them a great experience, to sell them on you, and to get in their mind what their event could look like. And you don't want everybody that comes through. You know, if you're a modern wedding venue, you don't want that rustic traffic to come through and say, yeah, I want a rustic barnyard wedding. Great. You know, that's not you. It's understanding that, yeah, this is who I am. Make it easy as possible. Make it mobile friendly. You make this whole big journey for them, and you make it as easy as possible for them to reach out to you across different intent types. And what I mean by that is, like, every call to action has a different intent layered into it. So, for example, someone who clicks the button that says, check your availabilities, that's a very different action than someone who says, contact us. Because contact us, they might have just random questions that they want to shoot by you. You know, someone who wants to check your availability, that's someone who's in the market and wants to play ball with you. And so you have different calls to actions that you give them, and you give them an experience, and you show them what their event could look like in every possible space in your event venue, as well as with as many different event types as possible in your space. And so that's kind of a high level, kind of messy way that I would explain it, but it's more about creating a journey and then helping them realize, is this venue for me? So that by the time they reach out, you don't have to hire a salesperson full time to go out and strong arm people into an event. You're really the salesperson. You don't need a salaried person. You just need someone that can answer questions and tour people through the building.
Yeah. That resonates quite a bit. Neal?
Yeah, I always defer to Hayden on all things marketing, but I think that's right. Part of, so I guess to take off a little bit, part of what we've learned, and we said this earlier, the important thing is that you control that experience, the marketing experience. It's the reason we don't love the directories and some other things that other people control. They control that customer experience. I think that as a venue owner, you become more agile the better you know your potential customers, the better you know yourself, the better you know who's likely to come in here. And when you can control that journey, and you can control that spend as well, so that you're marketing the things that you need to sell. Yeah. If your prime weeks are sold, you can back off and sell your weekdays. If you have a couple of prime days left that are surprising, you can jump in and do that. But you can control that journey for that person and that narrative so that you become agile. That's what we learned during COVID, that when we controlled the journey, we could change our messaging and our narrative to become a helpful community partner when all of the other competitors were scrambling. And this is one of the things you said, Jonathan, that struck me. We've watched really closely a competitor that was built for this venue up in northern Utah. There was a competitor that was built around the same time, and they were doing some kind of cool things. We were watching them kind of closely. And over time, what we noticed is that they started throwing in new services and throwing in new revenue opportunities. And then what we noticed is that 2 weeks after we did something on our site, they did it on theirs. And we just realized, just from watching them, that they were scrambling. They didn't know how to create a message. They weren't controlling their own narrative. They were just scrambling to do anything that they could to stay alive. And it's a nice little venue. It's great. And we've felt a little sorry because they seem like really, really nice people, and we hope that they survive. You always hope venues survive if you're in this business, because it's good for all of us that there's lots of places and people can get where they want. That's a good thing. And so, but we've just felt like if they just had some good guidance on how to stay to their core focus, to market the narrative that fits them, if they could control that a little bit. So the answer is, I don't love the idea of a silver bullet, because the environment around us changes too much. Yeah. It's about having a marketing system and a marketing mindset that allows you to know where you're going and be able to pivot when circumstances force you to. But, and this is something Hayden and I talk about a lot, maintaining a strategic long-term vision. Because there are going to be some dips and valleys. There are going to be times you have to pivot, but the pivot doesn't mean we change who we are. The pivot means I think we can ride through this thing by focusing on the long term and getting to where we need to be.
I love that. Guys, I have a switch up question that I'm going to ask in lieu of, what's your favorite or least favorite part about the venue? Because it's usually what we ask the venue owners on that venue owner series.
Yeah.
Gosh, has something in my eye. What
we have that effect on a lot of people, Jonathan.
Yeah.
A little weepy.
Hey, it's a good conversation. I'm really excited for people to hear it. It's going to add a lot of value. But guys, I want to ask the question, how much of the venue game, the profitable venue game, if our goal and our mission is to run a profitable venue, how much of it is won or lost in the build? And when I say the build, I mean the actual construction, the cost that you spend, as well as the aesthetic and then the location.
I'll defer to Neal on this one. When it comes to all things manual, I'm completely incompetent. I'm a millennial. These are the hands of an office worker right here. So go ahead, Neal.
So that's a really interesting question. And we've already talked about the Falls being massively overbuilt. We just looked at another venue that actually is not going to become a venue now, that was not built as a venue. I don't know. And it was a cool spot for sure. Pretty good location. And my first comment in touring it was, you way overbuilt this thing. You don't need all of this. And at the end of the day, and this is how I feel, and not everyone's going to feel the same. So there are different ways to get at this. But to me, a venue is a canvas. People are going to come in and create their own events. They'll paint their own colors. They'll bring their own florals. They'll do their stuff. If you're going to run a lean and profitable venue, in my mind, you want to sell space. And so the space has to be functional. And there are certainly fun things that you can put in there. LED lights and, there are certainly things you can add. But so in the build, the more you overbuild, the more you're taking everyone on an event already down your path, right? So now sometimes it's going to be, if you're in a barn, you're in a barn. There's a rural look. You're not going to have, modern urban beams and crap in there. You want a certain look if you're in that barn. But if you're building or going into a venue, I have seen and believe there can be successful venues with little build because they have the ability to create the event that the customer wants. So the answer to your question, I probably complicated it more than I do. You can overbuild and run yourself out of profitability, or certainly prolong your profitability and create big debt. And I guess you can underbuild and just create a crappy place that nobody wants to be in, and that's possible too. I think it's all integrated. I think it's a part of it. I don't have an easy answer to that question.
I think it goes back to the idea of that minimum viable product. So it's about building just enough. So when it comes to that, it's going to depend on your budget, your debt, and your forecasting for the next few years and saying, what are you comfortable handling? And from there, how do you make this work within the venue space that you want to build and in the location that it's at? You have to understand where the location's at. Is that a popular place for events? Are people going to be around there? So a lot of due diligence is definitely involved in that. We preach homework, understand your data, get as much data as you can, and then figure out what is the minimum lean model that you can put on there. and then build up, because you can always add on to a building. It's hard to just take off of a building. You can't do that profitably. So that would be kind of the message I would preach on that.
Awesome. Well, guys, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on and talking. This is some of my favorite topics. Talking about kind of the intersection of business and then this industry that we're all a part of. So, Neal, Hayden, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Jonathan, thanks for having us. When we go offline, I want to keep talking because this is really fun.
Yeah, definitely. Guys, if people want to connect with you, is LinkedIn the best place right now? Like, where I know there's a website coming, there's an Instagram coming. I'm sure Hayden can fix that in, an afternoon or two. But
we're on it. Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll get that and in there. But right now, we're going to launch this in a couple of weeks. Where's the best place to connect with you guys?
Right now, LinkedIn. So come find us on LinkedIn at Hayden Holm, at Neal Bergstrom. We have venue stuff all over our profiles, so you'll know you're in the right spot. I create venue content every single week, so I'm posting tips, templates, guides, things that can be useful for venue owners. And so come give us a follow. And really, right now, we're just open to talking to more venue owners. We want to help people. There's a big demand right now, and so we want to help as many people as we can. And so we're just encouraging venue owners to reach out, send us a direct message and let's have a conversation.
Cool. Awesome. I love it. Guys, thank you so much for today. It's been really, really fun. And Neal, like you said, I'm looking forward to connecting offline more, but this has been great. So appreciate it.
Fun. Thanks so much, Jonathan. And thanks for doing this. This is valuable for venue owners. So glad that we ran into you, and we will be regular listeners and followers.
It's huge. Awesome. All right. Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
All right. We'll see you.